Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. My name is Franklin James, the serial author, and my sole mission is to take you guys deep into the minds of history's most dangerous serial killers or killers in general, or at least I'll try to. And although it's not Murder and Mayhem Monday, it is Terrible and Terrorizing Tuesday. So I want to talk about a fugitive who's been on the run for over 20 years for murdering his entire family in Scottsdale, Arizona on April 10th, 2021. His name is Robert William Fisher, the family annihilator. Now, if you are familiar with Robert Fisher, I definitely want to give you guys my perspective because there's a lot to unpack there. There was a lot going on with him. But if you aren't too familiar with him, I'll do an overview of his life leading up to that horrific night. Now, Robert William Fisher was born on April 13th, 1961 in Brooklyn, New York City. His father's name is William Fisher and his mother's name is Jan Howe. He's the eldest of three siblings. Now, on the surface, Robert appeared to be an ordinary kid and teenager, but we do know he grew up in an unstable household filled with turmoil, which can have a profound effect on someone, especially children. And that tumultuous environment led to his parents' turbulent divorce when he was 15 years old, which left him quite bitter, according to close family. He felt like his mother just left him and just walked out on their entire family, turning her back on them, which leads to some abandonment issues. And abandonment issues can lead to people developing trust issues, anxiety, depression, fear of rejection, and that constant need for reassurance and codependency. I believe Robert Fisher felt abandoned. He felt those things. And I think, because he felt that way, it molded him into the person he became. Again, I'm not sympathizing. I'm just giving you guys some context. Now, the truth about his mother is that she was in an abusive relationship with his father. She even stated it was more of a yes, sir marriage, meaning that she pretty much did whatever he wanted. So one could assume that he was, very controlling, manipulative, abusive, probably both emotionally and physically. Either way, his mother felt as though she needed to leave. She had to get out of that situation. And Robert and his siblings went to go live with his father, which I'm sure his father had a say over. And Robert resented her for leaving. He didn't see her as the victim. He saw himself, his siblings, and his father. They were the victims. In fact, when he was much older, he told coworkers that his life would have been completely different if his mother wouldn't have left, which tells me that they probably experienced his father's controlling behavior. But at this point in time, it's 1976. He's 15 years old. His mom is no longer in the picture, and he and his family end up moving to Arizona. So he graduates high school in Tucson, Arizona in 1979. He then enlists in the U.S. Navy. Later on, he ends up becoming a firefighter in California, but he's forced to retire due to a back injury. He then moves back to Arizona to pursue a career in the medical field where he worked as a surgical catheter technician and a respiratory therapist. Now, Robert was also known to be an avid outdoorsman, hunter, and fisherman. But it's interesting because every position he held required a high degree of skill. He would definitely fall under the organized column in regards to the FBI's classifications of a killer. He would be an organized killer, but we'll get into that later. Okay, so now we can fast forward a bit. The year now is 1987, and he marries a woman by the name of Mary Cooper. And eventually they have two children, Brittany Fisher and Robert William Fisher Jr. Now, during their marriage, Robert was known to be cruel, a control freak, and distant. In fact, Mary's mother stated that he didn't socialize often with family because of a fear of getting too close. So again, the manifestation of childhood trauma and abandonment issues. But he was also known to be abusive as well. In fact, it was noted that he even turned the garden hose on Mary when she spoke out of turn. They often fought a lot, mostly about money and sex, and I'm sure whatever else he didn't approve of. Now, neighbors heard them fighting and heard screaming coming from their home. Their marriage was turbulent and hostile, similar to his parents. And I think that was a learned behavior. So perhaps he thought this was how you were supposed to treat the person you married. Or it was a part of his repressed anger towards women. Either way, one thing is certain, he had to be in control at all times. Now, he first appeared on the police's radar when he shot and killed a pit bull. Now, he claimed the pit bull was attacking a Labrador retriever, so he had to do something about it. The police believe that he orchestrated the entire thing just to kill the pit bull, which I'm inclined to believe, just because he was a hunter, right? I think that his life was beginning to unravel. I think certain things was taking place out of his control. I think he was seeking control, he was yearning for it. He couldn't go hunting at the time. So in his mind, he did the next best thing, kill a pit bull, kill a dog. I mean, this is psychopathic behavior, but it was noted that he was exhibiting disturbing behavior throughout his life. In fact, at one point during a hunting trip, he killed an elk and smeared blood over his face. You know, he walked next to a family member and shot a gun in the air right behind them. I mean, this guy was unwell. But I also found it interesting that he and his family were churchgoers as well. And people typically tend to go to church, in search of a place of comfort, to be a part of a community, to feel closer to God. But who knows what was Robert's reason? Maybe for him, it was out of obligation, maybe to appease others, maybe to continue some sort of family tradition. Perhaps he was searching for a sense of purpose because he felt lost. I mean, either way, he was struggling and battling demons. I also discovered that he cheated on his wife with a prostitute. He told his coworkers that he had a one night affair at a massage parlor, but I think it was more than just the one time. I know that his wife and himself, they sought marital counseling through the church, but it wasn't too helpful. In fact, his wife became even more withdrawn from the church leading up to the murders. I mean, their marriage had reached a volatile state. I mean, during their fights, she would scream things to him like, "You're worthless. I could have done better. We should get a divorce." I mean, these are things no one's going to take well, let alone a sociopath. And a divorce wasn't an option for Robert Fisher. In fact, he told a hunting buddy that, he was going to renew his faith and his marriage because he could not live without his family. And that hunting buddy, thought he was hinting at suicide over divorce, which I can believe because Robert had suicidal thoughts at one point during his marriage when things weren't going so well. And his marriage was coming to an end because his wife, Mary, told her friends that she was going to divorce him weeks before her death. And that sort of finality would have sent him into a mental crisis. I mean, this is a person who was traumatized as a child and abandoned in his mind, abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect him, to love him unconditionally, to always be there, to make him feel safe and secure. And I think he wanted his wife to take on those roles, right? Not that, you don't want your significant other to love you unconditionally and to always be there. And, you want to feel safe with them. But, that person that you're with isn't supposed to take on the role of your mother or a parent in general. I mean, it's unhealthy. And Robert Fisher had an unhealthy connection with his wife. And that's why when she decided to leave him, it triggered something in him that, he hadn't experienced since he was a kid. Things like emotions and feelings he kept in the dark, which was coming to light or at least becoming more apparent, right? I mean, his kids, they felt the brunt of it too. I think he kind of resented them because they weren't interested in the things that he was interested in. In fact, there's a story where Robert threw his kids off a boat trying to teach them how to swim. They were kicking and screaming and crying. And then finally, that's when he pulled them back in and said, "Now there, how's that?" But I believe it's that kind of behavior that led to his wife's decision and ultimately what happened on April 9th, 2001. Now, on that horrific night, a neighbor recalled hearing a loud argument. And I'm going to go into what he did, but I do want to warn you now, the actions that he took, they were evil, they were vile, they were heinous, right? And yeah, they're not for the faint of heart. So I just want to let you know that up front. He ends up shooting his wife in back of the head, right? So she may not have even seen it coming. And then he slits his kids' throats from ear to ear. He then goes behind his house, pulls the gas line, then goes back in, lights a candle, and then the very next morning, the house explodes. I mean, it's set ablaze. And this tells me that he was so ashamed of his family and filled with so much rage that he just wanted to burn it all down. Right. He wanted to go scorched earth. He wanted to erase them from existence. And it's almost biblical in a sense, right? I mean, he was a religious man. It reminds me of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? These two cities that God burned down because of their wickedness. And maybe, in his mind, that house that stood there was full of wickedness, right? His wife, she was the villain. She wanted to take away that ideal family that he thought he had. I mean, he was delusional. Now, investigators believe the murders took place around 9:30 p.m. to 10:15 p.m. At 10:43 p.m., there's footage of him on an ATM camera withdrawing $280. In the background is Mary's Toyota Ford Runner. 11 days later, the vehicle was found in Tonto National Forest near Young, Arizona, and he's been on the run ever since. 3 months later, he was officially charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. Now, a year later, in 2002, he was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Recently, he was taken off that list. I think it was 2021, but he is still considered a fugitive and wanted for murdering his family. And I'm not surprised he hasn't been caught, right? I mean, it's known that he was an avid outdoorsman, fisherman, a hunter. He had a handful of other skills as well. He's probably living off the grid somewhere, going under another name. I mean, who knows? I mean, he could be dead, but I doubt it. From what I've gathered, Robert William Fisher is quite resourceful. He's the family annihilator. And men who are family annihilators are typically driven by the loss of control, right? Including financial crises, separation, divorce, and they tend to demonstrate evidence of domestic violence. Family annihilators may feel the need for power and control over their family. They're trying to create that idealized family life. I think Robert Fisher wanted that ideal family. He was chasing it because he never had that growing up. You know, I feel as though he'd rather destroy his family by his own hands than have it be torn apart by something out of his control. I mean, it's a sick way of thinking. But I also believe he was an organized killer as well, based on the FBI's metrics. He has average to above average intelligence. He was educated, socially competent. He held skilled work positions. He was antisocial. He was married. And he went to great lengths to cover his tracks. And I think he did plan on killing his family. Now, he may not have planned on doing it on April 9th, 2001, but I think that he knew his wife wanted a divorce. She was unhappy. And in his mind, their death was the only outcome, right? I think that based on the measures and the things he did after the fact, that tells me that he at least had a plan in place just in case he had to do what he felt was needed. And it's just unfortunate because, he hasn't been arrested yet for these horrific crimes. And I don't know if he will be. I mean, I certainly hope the police, they find leads that will lead to his arrest. But, if he's evaded, authorities this long, he might do it even longer. But people are prone to error. People make mistakes. So I'm hoping he does too. But I thank you guys for tuning in on Terrible and Terrorizing Tuesday. I do ask that you smash that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment and let me know what you think about Robert William Fisher. Share this video out there, hit that bell for notifications, and you guys take care.